What's up, guys? Today's the day. We're playing against Norway, against Magnus Carlsen's team, and Magnus is also playing. He's playing on board 1 against our number 1 Valentin Dragnev. I am playing against Elham Amar today, who is a very young player, also Grandmaster, peak rating of 2585, I think, so also very strong. But I do have the white pieces today again, so I will definitely try to make some pressure. Yeah, actually what I wanted to mention was that we beat Norway, in fact, in last year's European Team Championship, where also Valentin Dragnev was playing against Magnus Carlsen on board 1, and he actually made a draw, even from a winning position before, so he could have even won the game. And in that match, all other games ended in draws, but mine, I was playing on the last board with black back then, and I managed to win that game, so we actually won the last match, which we played against Norway, with 2.5 to 1.5. So I really think that we do have chances today. Of course, Magnus, if he's in a great shape, it will be very, very hard for Valentin to fight with him, of course. But especially with white, if Valentin has a good day, I think he can really play with the absolute top in the world. He also got a winning position against Richard Rapport when we played against Hungary. So I really think we have pretty good chances against Norway today, but yeah, we will see how it turns out. I will finish my preparation now, or I will start it, and then yeah, let's see how it goes. And I will see you later. What's up, guys? I just got back from the game. I won my game against Amar Elham, rated 2540, but unfortunately the team lost 3-1. Magnus was in his shape today against Valentin on board 1, and also the other boards 2 and 4, we didn't have that many chances. So yeah, not a great day, but I'm happy at least that I could get 1 point, because losing 4-0 is always, even psychologically, not so great. So yeah, let's see who we get tomorrow. The tournament still is ongoing, so nothing's over yet. Yeah, also many people are not feeling so well, like people in the playing hall are coughing all the time. Some people also, I think, in my team are affected. I don't feel so well, also myself a little bit, but it's still okay. And yeah, I will see you then in the recap. And one thing I forgot to mention was that now actually starts like the critical phase of the tournament, because also for placement, this last phase of the tournament is super important for the standings in the end. So everyone is just trying to gather their last energy resources together, which is super tough, because the tournament is just taking all of your energy even now. Even with the rest day, I think many people are just struggling with holding up the energy levels for every game. If you play like some marathon games like me now that lasted for more than 5 hours, then it's pretty tough. So yeah, just wanted to inform you on how tough it can be in such serious chess events. By the way, what I forgot to mention is that the island where I'm staying on, this Margaret Island, actually is closed off now for all people except for the chess players or the people that live in the hotel. So the situation is pretty serious, it seems. Water levels are still rising. So for now we can stay here, but it's also not that pleasant to have it in your mind that maybe one day when you wake up you just have to move hotels, because otherwise the island will just flood. So yeah, I will keep you updated on that matter as well, and let's hope everything will stay under control. What's up, everyone? To today's recap of our match against Norway. I played against Grandmaster Amar Elham, very young, promising player from Norway. And as I've already mentioned before, unfortunately, we lost the match because of Magnus on board 1 being an absolute beast, and also our other boards being a bit unlucky in their games. By the way, this is take 2. I've already recorded the recap now, but then I saw that my mic was not recording. So yeah, at least I've learned a bit more about the game so far. So now I can already show you some more
things which I've already learned in the recap I've just recorded. So I was white in this game. I went for d4, knight f6, c4, and after e6 I went for g3 in this game, this move order. Knight f3 is the move I played in the last game when white allows this, first of all, this Queen's Indian, and with g3 the idea is now the Queen's Indian doesn't work anymore because now bishop g2, black is not in time to put the bishop on b7. And the other idea is that after d5, bishop g2, white has some extra systems. For example, after bishop e4 check, now knight d2, black cannot take on c4 because queen a4 check wins a piece, with the bishop being on g2 instead of the knight being on f3. So yeah, these are the ideas of starting with g3, but black has c5 as an extra system. This was my preparation. So yeah, this is like the downside of starting with g3. Now white could go for d5, which leads to this type of Benoni position. But I'm not really comfortable with that. Black gets quite easy play, just put the bishop on g7, castle, and then try to break through with a6, b5 on the queen side, looking for counterplay. So yeah, I do not really like this this position so much. I went for knight f3, c takes d4, knight takes d4. This is all theory here. e5, knight f3, d4, still in the book. e4 would look logical, but after knight d4, now black center gets under a lot of trouble. For example, queen a4 would work. I guess also castle when the pawn on e4 is weak, and the pawn on c4 will most likely also be won back by white. So yeah, that's why black goes e4 here. Now castle, knight takes e5 would be a fatal mistake because queen a5 check wins the piece due to this double attack. So castle, knight c6, e3, bishop e7. d3 might look logical, but the pawn on d3 will actually be more of a weakness than a strength, because black can never support the pawn with e4, since knight g5 will always win this pawn on e4. So the pawn on d3 will just be a weakness here. That's why black always goes bishop e7 in this position. E takes d4, e takes d4, and now bishop f4. Still my preparation. b4 is another move here for white, which is more concrete, but here I think black more or less equalizes by force, and bishop f4 gives black more room to go wrong. Castle, knight e5. By the way, instead of castle, bishop e6 is also one idea, with the idea that now knight e5 can be answered by rook c8, defending the knight here with the rook, which gives white also some other ideas. So this was also something I've checked for the game. He went castle, knight e5, and now he has to protect the knight on c6 with the queen b6. Here I went rook e1. So now my threat is knight takes e6, followed by rook takes e7. The bishop on e7 would hang. Bishop e6 was played. Queen takes b2 is also a move, but it's not a good one for black, because now after knight d2, I'm still threatening knight takes e6, followed by rook takes e7, and also the queen on b2 is a bit vulnerable in some cases. I still remember from my prep that after knight takes e5, rook b1 is a very accurate move order. Since rook takes e5 right away, or I think it was bishop takes e5, allows bishop b4, when black, I think, is equalizing. And if you start with rook b1, then I think now it was it rook takes e5 or bishop e5? Let me check. Yeah, I think it was rook takes e5, and now black doesn't have this idea with bishop e4 anymore. So yeah, this was the whole idea. He went bishop e6, knight d2. Still, black shouldn't take on b2, because after rook b1, then followed by rook takes b7, white would get a very dangerous initiative. So I went rook c8, and here I already didn't remember what was my preparation. I think I only remembered knight takes e5, and after rook e5, bishop c5, and now queen b3 was my idea, I believe. But now after rook c8, I also was at least thinking about queen b3, but what I didn't like was knight h5. When after takes, queen b6, I think it was bishop b5 first, rook d8, this was my calculation, and now I stopped because I thought, first of all, my bishop on e5 is a bit misplaced, so black has ideas with f6 to possibly even trap the bishop. And I only saw knight f3 when after c5 I didn't really like my position, because black has this protected passer, and still my bishop is a bit misplaced. And I felt like only black could be better here. But what I missed was knight b3 when white has some some chances to play for an edge, because now c5 doesn't work because of bishop b7. So queen b3 would have been better than the game. What I checked after the game, a3 was actually my preparation, which I briefly thought about during the game. The idea is just to get b4 in. If I get b4, then I will have a great position, because then my pawns will start running on the queen side. But what I missed during the game was that after queen b2, I can take bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and now play knight b3. When the queen on b2 is basically trapped, I'm just threatening knight d3 here. Let's say black goes h6, now knight d3, and rook c1, and the queen is trapped on c3. So I missed this idea, or couldn't remember it, with bishop takes c6. Otherwise, of course, a3 would be a very nice move to make, protecting the square on b4, and also intending to push b4 on the next move. I went knight d3, but now the issue is my opponent played the correct move, knight b4, and here I already felt that I'm under some pressure here. Now black's idea is to just take on d2 and then take the pawn on c4. The computer wants to go for something like this, but yeah, maybe white has still some chances to equalize here, but as a human, it just looks very strange to give up this pawn, and yeah, I didn't see anything for me here also to equalize. Therefore, I went b3. Obviously, not a move I want to make, because now my dark squares are weakened, and yeah, the pawn on d4 is now actually more of a strength than a weakness compared to other positions. He went bishop g4, which was a good move. Bishop f3, and now this was his chance, h5, when I'm in already quite some trouble, actually. I briefly thought about this move during the game, but I thought I could go rook e5, with the idea that rook b5 would win the piece here. But what I missed was that here he has this strong idea with rook c5, simply exchanging my active rook, and then my pieces are just extremely uncoordinated, and that would be already much worse. And bishop g4, hg4 is also pretty sad for me, because my knight on f3 on d2 can now never go to f3 anymore. My light squares are all weakened, and yeah, this pawn on d4 can also be quite annoying if he even pushes it to d3 in some occasions. But lucky for me, I took on f3, queen f3, and here I felt my position should be somewhat safe. After rook e8, now rook d1, h6, and now rook e5. And the idea, again, with rook e5, now I'm threatening rook b5. And if he takes, now bishop e5 puts him in quite a tough spot, because knight d7 doesn't work due to queen g4. I saw this during the game. And he cannot take on e5, because queen takes c8 simply wins the exchange. And otherwise, I either win the piece on d7 or I have checkmate on g7. So yeah, rook e5 is also not good for black. Queen c6 is what he played. Still a good move for black. And the position should be still equal, but yeah, after h4, now knight d7. In general, I thought after queen takes c6, b takes c6, I'm the one who has like the better chances to play for something, possibly in the endgame. I will explain why later. I went to h4 just to cut out all g5 ideas, possibly trapping my bishop on f4, knight d7, and now I took on c6. What would have been better was rook d5. I saw this during the game. Now I'm simply threatening to take on d4. But what I missed was that after bishop d2, here I only thought about rook takes d2, when knight f6 simply wins the exchange due to the pin. But what I missed was this nice idea with bishop takes d2, knight f6, and now rook f5. I'm protecting the queen. Now the pawn on d4 is weak, and here I would have a very nice advantage. I took on c6. I didn't see this idea. bc6, rook e8, king f1, and still here I also thought that I'm probably the one who has at least somewhat practical chances in this endgame, because I have the better pawn structure. Knight f8, knight f3, and now he went knight e6. I think pretty logical. Computer wants to go c5 first, but it's very hard to understand during the game what are the possible differences. Anyway, I wanted to go knight e1 in the game when my knight will come to d3, and I thought I do have some pressure because the pawn on c5 is always weak. The bishop on b4 can be a bit awkward at some points because it's not doing that much here, only controlling this diagonal. So I felt like I should have some chances here as well. I went knight e6, now knight e5, c5. Taking on f4 would be a mistake because now I have knight takes c6, an intermediate move. when I simply win a pawn because now the bishop on b4 is attacked and so is the knight on f4. He went c5, now knight d3, a5. Again, computer likes to go knight f4 and simply hold this position, but from a human perspective it looks quite, at least a little bit unpleasant for black, because my knight is just untouchable on d3 and he always has to watch out for this weakness on c5. He went to a5, bishop c1, bishop c3, maybe not the best idea for him. Bishop a3 now, because now I can target the pawn on c5. Rook c8, h5, and yeah, this was the start of where I think I got some pressure, because h5, now I'm just preparing f4, f5, to then target the pawn on c5, dislocating the knight on e6. And with h5, I'm just fixing his pawn structure here on the king set, and I'm just gaining space. He went king f8, and now I have this idea with f4, when here he's already under some pressure. He went g6, f5, I thought would be maybe a better option, but even here, during the game, I thought g4 would be an option. But here it turns out that after f5, knight g5, this position is pretty unclear, because black also has his play here with the pawn on g4. What is better than this f5 idea, than this g4 idea, is simply to bring the king, and let's say black protects the pawn on c5, then to prepare g4 either with rook g1 or go g4 right away, when I still have these ideas with f5 and the position is pretty unpleasant for black. But after f4 he went g6, now I took, and here I went g4. Still I have these ideas with f5, and therefore he went king g7. Now f5 doesn't work that well because he can take and go rook f8, pinning the pawn on the king, and he will win the pawn on f5. So I went king g2, bishop b4, bishop c1, bishop c3. We were both low on time, by the way, and this was the 36th move. So time control is only at move 40, and that was when we got additional time on the clock. King f3, now king f6, another inaccuracy, because now I just get rook h1 and he has to go back to g7. King e4, now I'm bringing my king possibly to d5, and here I felt like my position should already be winning. But after knight f8, now magical move 40, where I was only with seconds on my clock, I went for knight e5, which in hindsight was not a good decision at all, because I missed this idea with knight h7. The idea with knight e5 was to avoid knight d7, knight f6. Pardon me. But I just missed that that he has the same idea with knight h7 to start with. What I missed was that f5, g5, now that I have f6. So I saw f5, but after g5 I thought black would have time for knight d7, knight f6, when then the pawn on g4 is also kind of a weakness. But f6 is just crushing, because king f6, now rook h6, all my pieces are coming into the game. Knight g6, knight e5, this pin, it's just a horrible position for black. Just lost, you can say. King g6, also the same, knight e5 check, and then I'm winning the pawn on h6, pawn on g5, and the game is just over. So f5 would have been much stronger. If he takes, I guess I can just take with the pawn, and the pawn on h6 will fall on the next move. So I just missed this idea after f5, g5, f6. This would have ended the game much sooner. I went knight e5 instead, knight h7, and now g5. So my whole strategy here was to lock this knight out on h7, that it cannot come into the game with knight f6, even though g5 looks a bit anti-positional because it puts the pawn on a dark square, and I have a dark square bishop. I was only playing on the fact that the knight could just be out of the game, which then later in the game even happened. Now knight f8, again a big mistake. Rook e8 apparently is the way for black. Now black might be threatening d3, and king d5 runs into rook d8 check, king takes c5, and now d3, when the knight on e5 is attacked and black is threatening d2. So rook e8 is something I think we both missed. He went knight f8 instead, now rook h3. Not the best move, computer just wants to go knight d3 and then king d5, but I just wanted to stop all sorts of d3 ideas forever. a4, now rook f3, my rook is coming to f7, rook f7 check. So yeah, he wanted to create this weakness on b3 with a4, and he goes after it with rook b8. Now rook e7, rook b3, and knight d3. So yeah, here you can see my strategy kind of worked with locking out the knight on f8, because he has no squares to go. The rook on e7 protects the square on e6, and yeah, the knight can just never come out of this box here. I played knight d3. By the way, the rook, the engine suggests rook e8 here also, but yeah, d3, and now the bishop comes back. Yeah, so this was also the idea. The pawn on d4 is actually in black's way. After knight d3, the bishop on c3 just does nothing, doesn't help the defense. So the pawn on d4, if it wouldn't be on the board, it would actually help black in some cases. Rook b8, king d5. Now he went rook c8, and yeah, rook c8, probably a mistake, but knight h7 also doesn't look very promising for black. I guess I could also here go bishop f4, when his position is also very tough to defend. Rook c8, bishop f4, now knight h7, and here I went for king d6, again being low on time. Here I thought about playing bishop e5, but I just couldn't fully work it out. I calculated knight g5, rook g7 check, king f8, rook takes g6, knight f7. And I think around here I stopped because I thought now there's nothing really for me to play anymore. I only have one more pawn. But it turns out that black is actually on the brink of being mated here with rook e6 check, king d7, and now bishop f6. I'm threatening rook e7, and his pieces are just all miserable, and I'm probably just winning material on the spot. So I missed this this sequence here. Should have calculated a bit further, and then I would have most likely seen it. Instead, I went king d6, which doesn't do much. Yeah, I thought maybe I have some ideas with king d7, possibly kicking out the rook, but yeah, it was more like a move to not lose on time. I was already pretty low on time, as you can see as well. So yeah, bishop e5 would have been much stronger. I went king d6, now bishop a5, king d7, rook f8, rook e8. And this position I felt like it should actually be winning for me, but according to the computer, it's a draw. He went bishop b4, king e7, and now bishop a3, already a decisive mistake. Don't ask me why bishop a5 is apparently a draw. Bishop a3, the problem is I went knight f2, now bishop b2, and what I missed in the game, I mean, what was my idea at first was to go knight g4, when my threat is knight h6 followed by bishop e5. Let's say black goes bishop c3. I just go knight h6, and his king is actually being checkmated. Yeah? He can only go knight f6 when I can take with the pawn, for example, and just queen, and I'm winning here. But what I thought, what was my issue after knight g4, I thought he could go d3, when now the bishop is protecting the diagonal, and knight h6, now I don't have bishop e5 anymore, yeah, because the bishop can just take. But what I missed was that now I can go knight f2, and I'm winning the pawn on d3 simply with a much better version to what we had in the game later on. So I went knight d3 back because I didn't see this idea with knight g4, d3, knight f2. Bishop a3 again, mistake. Apparently bishop c3 is better. Bishop a3, bishop d2, king g7, and now I went for this plan with king d6 to just pick up the pawn on c5. Knight f8, objectively a mistake because now I could go king e7 again, back again, but again there I did not really see this plan, and also I was a bit afraid already that it would be a 3-time repetition. So I went for knight takes c5, king f7, king d5, takes, king e6, king takes d4. And here was the decisive moment of the game. He went king d7, and after that I'm just simply winning. Knight d7 is holding fairly easily here. c5, the point is he can go knight b8 or knight e5, and he can just set up a fortress with knight c6. For example, king c4, knight c6, king b5, and now either king d7 or king d5, and there's just no way for me to break through here. But he went king d7 and now king d5, and I'm simply pushing my pawn, and then also his knight is still trapped on f8 basically. So he went knight h7, bishop f4, c5, c6, king c8, king d6, and here the final decisive idea, bishop e5. I should be careful. I think c7 is maybe not winning, even king c8. And if I go king c6 here, he always has these stalemating ideas, yeah, and this would be just a draw. Another thing to be careful about, if I go king e6 here, for example, and move my king to f7, now knight takes g5 is just a draw. because black will simply take the last pawn, and I will only have king and bishop left. So bishop e5, now he cannot take on g5 because bishop f6 wins the piece. King c8 was played, bishop f6, knight f8, bishop e7, knight h7. By the way, after bishop e7, he already resigned, because after knight h7, I would simply go c7, and black is in Zugzwang, because if wherever he moves the knight, I will simply take it, and after king b7, king d7, I will just promote my pawn on the next move. By the way, this position, I think if it would be white to move, then it could be a draw. Maybe I could go bishop d8 if it's white to move and it would be winning, but I'm not sure. Because if white to move and goes king c6, then again black has the idea to take on g5, bishop g5, and then it's stalemate again. So overall, yeah, many mistakes in this game, but I'm quite happy with the phase. Where was it? With this phase here. These couple of moves with h5 and f4. These were pretty nice, I think, just bringing the king. But then later on, my technique was just not very good, as it was in my last game. So I really need to work on that. Other than that, the match was tough. Yeah, what can we say? With Magnus on board one, it's not easy. Tomorrow we're gonna play against Peru, where we are the favorites again. So this will be important for us to come back. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's recap. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow.